Welcome to 5460, the Joe West Podcast. Featuring former Major League Baseball umpire Joe West. For 6 decades, no one has seen more baseball than Joe West. And now he shares those stories with you every week right here on the Podcast Heat Network.
Joe West is asking the Reds to leave the field. I guess maybe as a form of security.
Well, Joe West is not going back behind the catcher. So what is he doing? He wants to throw him out or what?
He's not going to back away from confrontation. It's just not in his makeup.
Which guy are we talking about backing away?
Well, come to think of it, it's both guys.
And they're warning the Atlanta dugout now. A helmet came flying out. Bobby Cox, I don't think threw the helmet. One of his players did, but Bobby's jawing back at Joe West. But somebody's been tossed, and here comes Cox. It was Bobby Cox who threw the helmet out there.
Off the umpire, and that's a foul ball. Joe West gets drilled, and he appears none the worse for it. He's a strong man.
Nice. Now Joe's going to give him some argument because Mark's saying, "Why do you do?" Joe, just get over there and umpire, will you? Yeah. Just get over there and umpire. No. That's all.
It's 5460, the Joe West Podcast. Here's Joe West and your host, Mike Claiborne.
Well, Joe, our guest today is a person that I'm anxious to talk to. You've known him for a long time, and I think the fact that he's the only American that has won championships in 2 different sports. There's only 2 people that have done it. Jack Kent Cooke did it with the Washington Redskins and the Los Angeles Lakers, but he's Canadian. Jerry Reinsdorf is from good old New York, and he is our guest today, the owner of the Chicago White Sox and the Chicago Bulls, Jerry Reinsdorf. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
And my pleasure to be here.
Well, let me ask you right off the bat, how did you and Joe West cross paths? Because, you know, we found out now that Joe knows virtually everyone, and now you're on the list. So you tell us how you guys cross paths.
Well, I think I was introduced to Joe by Ken Harrelson. You know, they're very close friends. But I'm not sure. I mean, Joe's umpired enough of our games that we did cross paths, and Joe was the head of the Umpires Association. We had conversations from time to time.
Well, my first recollection of having conversations with you was at a meeting that you requested from Joe Torre. And I think you were upset that you felt like I was picking on a member of your team, and I wasn't picking on him. He was actually not behaving himself, and I ended up kicking him out a couple of times. So you had asked Joe Torre, why was I picking on your team? And Joe said, I don't think he's picking on your team. I just think something happened. You said, well, I would like to know why. And Joe said, well, why don't you ask him? And so we had that meeting in Arizona, if you'll remember.
Yeah, I remember the meeting, and it was about a member of my team, but it wasn't a player. It was.
It wasn't?
No, it was a manager.
Oh, that's right. It was a manager. It wasn't a player. And so we had a nice conversation, and I think both of us realized that we're both in this to protect the game of baseball, and that nobody's holding a grudge against anybody. We're just trying to do our job, and I think you respected that when we had our conversation. And then, of course, you know, we had the situation with Hawk Harrelson hated me for calling a balk on one of your pitchers, and that went haywire for a little while. and then the funny thing about Hawk was I had to miss the first half or the first 19 games of a season, and Steve Stone, your other broadcaster, said that this was Joe West's first game back, and Hawk said, why? What was he out for? Because he was still mad at me about calling a balk on one of your pitchers. And he said, well, he had a little bout with throat cancer. And you know how sentimental Hawk can be. So after the game was over, I'm in the shower, and your announcer, Hawk Harrelson, kicked in the door of the umpire's room, came charging in, said, where is he? And, of course, the other three umpires are going, who? They said, where's Joe West? And they said he's in the shower. So I'm in the shower, got soap in my hair and everything. He comes in, he starts screaming at me. He says, look, we can fight each other, we can kill each other, we can hate each other, but don't you dial me, you son of a bitch. Just like that. And we've been friends ever since. So,
that's true. I remember Hawk on the air saying Joe West was a disgrace to baseball. And then I don't know, a year later, I get a text, a picture of you and Hawk hugging each other on a golf course.
At a golf course, yeah.
So I guess neither of you held a grudge.
No. And you know, I think the fact that you and I chatted about what our responsibilities are to the game meant a lot to you. I know it meant a lot to me because you said just about the same thing I did, that we're all in this together and we're all trying to make baseball as good as we can make it. And I respected that about you. I remember telling you, stop by the umpire's locker room and just to say hello, just to, you know, introduce yourself to the umpires. And your question was, I can really do that? I said, absolutely. And they'd appreciate you coming by. So,
and I have done that a couple of times.
Yeah.
But look, I have nothing but respect for the umpires. They have no reason, to want to affect the outcome of the game. Doesn't matter if it's 10-0 or 1-0. That, as far as I can tell, they call them the same. And the fact that, you know, you called a balk on Burley when you shouldn't have, I don't hold that against.
I can't believe you would say that, you know. Frank Robinson actually said, you know, you called a balk on him in that first inning, and then 3 innings later he needed to pick a guy off and he balked again. What do you think, you weren't going to call it again? And Frank was our boss at the time, and he was he actually backed me up. He says, yeah. And he did say this, though. He said, you are one of the few guys that call balks. And I can remember when Mark threw his glove up in the air, that the other 3 umpires said, no, Joe, no, don't kick him out. Well, we loved Mark Burley. He pitched fast games. We didn't want to kick him out. But so I remember then that's when Hawk went on his tirade, because I think he was one of Hawk's favorites too. So
everybody loved Mark. Mark's a great guy.
Yes, see it.
You know, he never shook off a catcher. He got the ball, took the sign, and threw it. The only thing that's bad about Mark was he screwed up our concession business.
Hey, Jerry, for you, you know, people get involved in ownership. What led you to want to get involved in ownership? And we'll start with baseball.
Well, first of all, you have to remember I grew up in Brooklyn. And at a time when the Brooklyn Dodgers were everybody's religion. You know, we didn't have much in Brooklyn. The Dodgers were the unifying thing. And, you know, I was at Ebbets Field the first day Jackie Robinson played. So I just loved baseball. I never thought I'd be able to own a team. I was always lucky to get the money to buy a ticket. But many years later, after I got into business, I saw an ad in the Wall Street Journal where somebody was advertising for people who might invest $500,000 to be a limited partner in a baseball team. So I answered the ad. I love baseball. By then I was living in Chicago, and the Dodgers were gone from Brooklyn. I'm still upset about that. And I answered the ad. This fellow had a plan to buy the San Francisco Giants and move them to Toronto. And obviously that didn't work out. And I don't know, a year or so later, he called me and he said, I'm going to buy Cleveland. That didn't work out. Then he was going to buy the Mets. And that didn't work out. And I was taking a shower one day, and I started thinking, why in the world did I want to be a limited partner where I had nothing to say about running the team? Plus, in a team that didn't play in Chicago. In those days, they didn't have satellites. So I'd never get to see him play. And the thought occurred to me that the Bill Veeck group that owned the White Sox at the time normally didn't own teams for very long. Bill's history was that he'd buy a team and 5 years later turn it over and make a profit. So through a friend that knew Bill, I contacted him and he said, yeah, I'm getting ready to sell. And that's what happened.
Well, that's awesome. You know, looking back on your your day that you saw Jackie Robinson's debut. I'm going to ask you this question because you were there, and I already know the answer, and I'm hoping you observed enough to notice this. Did you notice how many umpires were working the day that Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier?
Well, I didn't notice it, but there probably were 3 because Gladys Gooding, the organist, used to, when the umpires came out on the field, used to play 3 blind mice.
Yeah, that's a cute story because there were only 3 umpires in the movie 42. Every game that Jackie Robinson played, whether it was in the minor leagues or in the major leagues, there were 4 umpires. So they obviously didn't research that to figure out how to get that right. But that's a funny story. She played 3 blind mice. That's
3
cool.
blind mice. When the umpires came out, I really liked the movie. I really enjoyed the movie. But I
thought it was great. Yeah.
But I made a list of about 25 things that were wrong. But nobody cares about those things except me. The fact is, the overall story was pretty good.
Yes, it was. It was. I could remember getting up to sing at Mickey Gilley's club in Pasadena, Texas, and I would walk the piano player to the stage because he was blind. And when I would walk into the stage, his name was Frank Brown. And Frank would sit down at his piano while one of the guitar players were playing 3 blind mice. And Frank would hit a G chord and look up and say, "Joe, isn't that terrible? There's only 2 of us."
Jerry Reinsdorf, you are one of the senior owners in Major League Baseball, and I would consider you one of the stewards of the game. What's the biggest change other than the TV money that you've seen over the course of your ownership?
Well, of course, that is the biggest change is the money. I mean, my payroll in 1981, which is my first year, for all 25 players was $3.5 million. And 3 guys were making a lot of money. Ronald Floor made $900, Carlton Fisk $550, Jim Essian $250, and the other 22 guys filled out a $3.5 million payroll. Now this year we're going to have $184 million payroll, and we're not even close to be anywhere, to being one of the top teams. So the money's the biggest thing, I think. And of course, the players are different, but people of every generation are different. Back in the early days when I started watching baseball, and I went to my first game in 1946. Players all had jobs in the wintertime. They pumped gas. They worked in hardware stores. Now, and they came to spring training to get in shape. Now, nobody works during the winter, and the money is so huge. But aside from the money, I think the game was played more intelligently in the old days. I rarely did you see a guy throw to the wrong base or fail to hit a cutoff man. I think those early players played the game more intelligently, primarily because it took them 5-6 years to get through the minor leagues. I remember the Dodgers had 25 farm clubs. And so by the time you got to the big leagues, you really were schooled in how to play the game.
Yeah, and looking back on that, when O'Malley had the teams at Vero Beach, his minor league teams roomed where the big league teams were. I mean, so they actually grew up together. So what you're talking about is really good because they would feed off the experience from the big leaguers even in the home camp. And I can remember going to Vero Beach for spring training games, and there'd be an A-ball player talking to Don Sutton, or there'd be an A-ball player talking to Don Drysdale. Just the correlation of the veterans talking to the younger players was different. And that's another thing, since we consolidated umpires in both leagues, some of these guys don't know who all the umpires are. When I came up in the National League, we would see the clubs at their home field 3 to 4 times. Now we're lucky to go to each city one time because we have to work both leagues. So it makes a difference in some of the relations between umpires and players too. But I can also remember when I started that they wanted to know what each one of you was like. I mean, when I came to the big leagues, there were players sitting on the bench asking other players, "Have you had this guy before? What's he like? Can you talk to him? Can you argue with him? Can you say anything to him?" And I can remember John Kibler coming over when I was in Atlanta. He said, "When you were in the minor leagues last year, did you kick out 50 players?" And I said, "No, I hadn't kicked out 50 players in my career. He said, well, they think you have, so don't change their mind.
Jerry Reinsdorf is our guest. And Jerry, you've had some very good teams in baseball. So this may be a loaded question for you. Best player that ever played for you?
Wow. Probably Frank Thomas. He was, for a period of years, he probably was the best right-hand hitter I think I ever saw. Probably it was either Frank or Pujols or Miguel Cabrera, but Frank was definitely the best hitter that I ever had. He left a little to be desired around the first base bag, but he sure could hit.
He'd make up for it with a 3-run homer the next inning. So that's how it normally works.
In fact, I saw him last night on our post-game show, and he commented that his goal was to drive in more runs than he let in.
So Frank was a football player in college too, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. He played a year at Auburn.
Yeah, and you had a friend who was a football player at Northern Illinois named Fortunato, didn't you? Weren't you good friends with Dan Fortunato?
No, I had a partner in a real estate business named Don Fortunato.
Don Fortunato.
Yeah,
okay.
He was a cousin of the.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I thought he was the football player for some reason. No.
Hey, what about the other guy from Auburn? I think his name is Jackson.
Vincent Jackson,
otherwise known as Bo.
Bo still works here for us. Bo's one of the great guys that ever played the game. He's just it's unfortunate that he played football because he could have really been a great baseball player had he not gotten hurt. But he still lives in Chicago, in the Chicago area, and comes to a lot of games, does some stuff for us. Really a very smart, intelligent guy who does an awful lot of good things in the community.
I had him in spring training when he came up with the Royals, and he fouled a ball off his foot, and he's hopping around the batter's box, and he's hopping around, and the trainer comes out to try to treat him and help him, and he's hopping away from the trainer and going around the batter. He went around the batter's box 3 times. And I said, hey, if that was a linebacker, you wouldn't be doing that. If a linebacker hits you, he jumped right back in the box. But he was a tremendous athlete. And you know what? I don't think he had enough time to learn how to play the game the right way because he was just a tremendous athlete. He could do everything.
I think football, even kept him from being as great as he could have been, because the offseason is important. The offseason is important in learning the game and reflecting on what you did last year, what you're going to do next year. Bo never had any time off, but his power was unbelievable. His arm was unbelievable, and he could run like a deer.
All right, so now I ask you about the best player that played for you. Who's the best player you ever saw?
The best player I ever saw was Willie Mays. The most exciting player I ever saw was Jackie Robinson. I think Willie was the best one I ever saw. I did see DiMaggio play near the end of his career, and I saw Ted Williams play. But all around, I think Willie probably was the best player I ever saw.
What kind of money would you have to pay him these days?
Well, you'd ask him what percentage of the team he would like to own.
They asked him that at a banquet at Don Shula's hotel one night, and Willie came down there to be the speaker, and Mickey Rivers was sitting in the front row, and he said, "Willie, what would you command in today's market? How much would they have to pay you?" Because everybody had heard DiMaggio say what you just said. You give him part of the team, and Willie said, "Oh, I don't think you'd have to pay me a whole lot." And Mickey said, "What do you mean? At 660 home runs, you stole more bases than anybody, the greatest outfielder in baseball. What do you mean they wouldn't have to pay you a whole lot?" He said, "Well, I'm 76 years old. I don't think I'd be very good right now."
We're visiting with Jerry Reinsdorf, the owner of the Chicago White Sox and also the Chicago Bulls. And Jerry, I mentioned earlier, you're the only American that's had a chance to be an owner of 2 teams that have won championships in different sports. Luck, skill, having good players, a combination of everything for that reason?
Listen, luck enters into anybody's success. Nobody can be a success without a lot of good luck and without other people helping you. And when I bought the Bulls, Michael Jordan had been drafted, but he hadn't played. And the prior owners, they had no idea what they had in Michael Jordan. He averaged 18 points a game in college. I had no idea what Michael Jordan was. If they had any idea what he was, they never would have sold the team. So there's an awful lot of good luck in that. But I also had a great general manager. He put 11 other really good players around Michael to win the championships. But there was a lot of, there was total luck that Michael came to the Bulls, and then I bought the team, right after he was drafted.
Well, they often said that the only person that could hold Michael Jordan under 20 points was Dean Smith. And that was his college coach.
Right.
He wouldn't let him take over the game. So, but yeah, and that's kind of interesting that you looked at it the way he only averaged 18 points, because he didn't average a lot of points in college. So that is interesting. You might not have got to buy that team if they'd let him go.
Well, if they had known what they had. Because I went back and I looked at the newspaper reports the day after the Bulls drafted Jordan, and Rod Thorne, who was the general manager, was quoted as saying something like this: "He's going to be a fine offensive player. You're not going to build a team around him, but he's going to be a fine offensive player."
Rod Thorne, what a good man. For you, Jerry, as you look at the game now, you've seen a lot of things, good, some bad along the way. If there's one thing you'd like to see more of or less of, what might they be?
Well, I'd like to see the second baseman standing on the dirt, not the grass. I hope we change that rule. And I think that would open up the game a little bit. Fewer strikeouts, maybe fewer walks. But yeah, it's still a great game. We just have to tinker with it a little bit. We do have to shorten the time. Because today's younger generation, I don't think they have the desire to sit and watch a game for 3 hours. I think we need to get the games a little shorter. But we're working towards that. The commissioner's got a number of initiatives, I think, that'll shorten the game. Still a great game, greatest game around.
Well, it's typically American. You got to hit a round ball with a cylindrical bat, and then you got to hit it square. And then you got to hit it where they don't catch it.
That's right.
And then because of that, if you fail at it, you're always looking to blame somebody, and usually it's us. So,
yeah. Well, look, hitting's the hardest thing to do in sports. It's the only thing where if you succeed 30% of the time, you're a star. I mean, can you imagine a quarterback completing 30% of his passes? He wouldn't make it to the next game. I mean, nope. Hitting is really, really difficult.
Yeah, and there are no more Ted Williams, and there are no more Willie Mays, and there are no more Joe DiMaggios. Nobody's going to hit 400. They're just not going to do it.
No, I think there are a number of reasons for that. One of which is the fact that Williams, and when he hit 400, he probably faced the same pitcher 3-4 times in a game. Nobody goes more than 3 times through the lineup now. Everybody's got a bullpen full of guys that are throwing 100 miles an hour, and so it's pretty tough for a hitter to get as many hits as Williams got. I mean, that's 2 hits every 5 times up. That's amazing.
Well, there was a podcast on about a week ago that they interviewed Rod Carew, and they asked him. He said, "What was your favorite song?" Now think about that for a minute. What is your favorite song? And Rod Carew said the national anthem. And he said, "What do you mean the national anthem?" He said, "Well, because when they played that, I knew I was going to get 2 hits."
Well, he did.
Yep, he was something else. They asked him one time about the shift. They said, "What do you think you'd hit in a shift?" He said 900.
He probably would have.
Just go the other way.
Yeah,
just going the other way all the time.
Yeah. And one guy I love to watch hit, and the shift didn't do any good against him, was Ichiro. He got 5 hits against us in a game once, and every one was a grounder that went into a different hole. He was magic. He could hit the ball wherever he wanted to.
Yeah, he could really handle the bat. I watched. I've got a picture I found just the other day of the game. It was a World Series game. And we asked Hank Aaron to come by the locker room just to say hello. And he was in a wheelchair at the time. And it was the last game of the Cubs and the Indians World Series, and he came by the locker room. And when he passed away, they were showing all these videos of him hitting, and he hit just as many home runs to right center field as he did to left center field, and he hit the ball on the line, and I think they're getting away from that. They're all trying to pull everything down the line, and that hurts their average. You can't teach what he did, and he wasn't as flashy as Willie Mays, but I think he hit for just about the same average, maybe a little better.
He might have had a higher average, and he never hit 50 home runs in a year.
No, he never hit 50. That's right. And but he hit line drives to right center, left center, wherever the ball was pitched, he hit it. And our guys today aren't doing that, and I think that's hurting some of the offense of the game because they're all worried about pulling the ball out of the park.
Yeah, I think if we do something about the shift, that might change the players' attitudes. But they get up there and they look at everybody on one side of the field, and they know they probably can't hit it through those guys, so they try to hit it over. And then you get into this whole thing about the launch angle, and the fact is, if you're trying to uppercut your swing, you're going to miss the ball more than if you're trying to hit a line drive. And I think that's probably the issue. And so I think if we do something with the shift, I think you'll see batting averages go up, and you'll see more doubles and more triples, and fewer strikeouts.
Yeah, well, I know I've mentioned this to you before, but my biggest complaint about changing the rules was the DH, and because I think it slows the game down. And when I say that, I say it because I grew up umpiring in the National League. And in the National League, I actually told somebody this. I said, if Tom Seaver threw more than 9 pitches to the 7th, 8th, and 9th hitter, somebody fouled off a 2-strike pitch. And I mean that because the National League went right after the guys 7, 8, and 9. And in the American League, because of the DH, there's no pitcher at the end of the lineup, so they didn't do that. So they pitch completely different. And I look over the history of the game, and I see where Earl Weaver and Billy Martin burned out a lot of pitchers because of the DH. And I think that hurts the game in itself. And so I was against them putting the DH in both leagues, even though from an owner standpoint, it might be better for you if my pitcher doesn't bat for injury reasons. However, I don't think it was good for the game, and that's just my opinion. And you might have a different opinion. You might have an owner's side of this that I'm not seeing.
No, I liked the game better when the pitchers hit. I did, but the fans seem to they seem to like the DH, and I think that's why we went to it. But you sort of alluded to one thing in the National League where the pitchers had a hit. I think it was better for their health because they might be pitching a good game, but be behind 2-1 in the 7th inning. They got to come out because the pitchers, because they need the pitcher can't hit and they want to score runs. Whereas with the DH, you could leave your pitcher in as long as he's pitching well and he doesn't get a blow. And I think in the old rule with the pitchers hitting, they'd get a blow once in a while, and that probably was better for their health. But the fans seem to want the DH, and we need to give the fans what they want, because at the end of the day, it's the fans that own the game. It's not the players, not the umpires, not the owners. We're all in a way just the custodians of the game, and this game belongs to the fans. If the fans overwhelmingly want the DH, then we got to give it to them.
Jerry, when you look back at all the owners that you've been in rooms with over the years, who are some of your favorites, and who may have been some of the more colorful owners in some of those meetings?
Well, obviously, the single most colorful owner was George M. Steinbrenner III. I gotta say, he was as colorful as anybody, and we had our battles, but we were great friends. We had a lot of laughs together. So he probably was the most colorful, but there was some, I really liked. I really liked Lou Wolf, and I liked the owner of Detroit. Oh God, I forgot his name. I'm doing a senior moment, but They're going to. Roy Eisenhart in Oakland was probably my best friend in the game when he was in the game. And Artie Moreno in L.A. is a guy that really loves baseball. He watches the East Coast games at 4:00, and then he watches the West Coast games at 7:00. He sees more games than anybody. I mean, so there's some. I think I've come across some really terrific people among owners, and then there've been some I didn't care for as much, but I'm not about to mention their name.
We'll save that for the book.
Okay.
For you, there's so many things that you've seen. You guys have just finished a collective bargaining agreement. You're going to start a new one. What are some of the things you're looking forward to seeing take place in this next round of years with this new CBA?
Well, the best thing is that we're playing baseball. People have asked me, who won? Did the players win? Did the owners win? What do you like? What do you not like? I don't want to talk about any of that. I just want to play baseball. I just think it's great that we got it done. And what I'm looking forward to is 5 years of peace, and hopefully the players and the owners work together to make it a better game.
Yeah, Mike, you should probably tell him what I told you about settling the players and the owners dispute.
When everything was going on and there was no baseball, Joe just told me to say, just let Manfred know that I'm thinking about coming back. And at that point, he knew he could get everything resolved before Joe could get his equipment on.
So, that was quite the deal. Manfred and I had our little tiffs too, but I think he, in his heart, he's trying to do everything he can to make the game better. And I tell these guys all the time, as an umpire, your first responsibility is to the game of baseball. And that doesn't necessarily mean the commissioner's office. And your second responsibility is to your profession. And that might not mean the umpires union. And your third responsibility is to do what you know is morally honest and correct in your heart. And if you do those things in that order, then everything you do will be correct. You might get killed for it, but everything you do will be correct. But
I think we all should realize how lucky we are to be involved in this sport, in this game, because the game is America, and we're just the custodians for it. Our obligation is to the game and to the fans.
For you, Jerry, owning a team in two different sports, we look at the NBA and how they market things. We look at Major League Baseball and how they market things. Do you see any similarities between the two leagues?
Well, I'm sure there are similarities. The NBA is a worldwide sport. I mean, the NBA games are televised in, I don't know, more countries than I thought existed. I think something like 400 countries. I didn't know there were that many countries. And so it's more worldwide. Baseball is just an American sport. I mean, I know we try to build it internationally, and we play it in Japan and in China. We're playing some games in Europe, but it's still America. To me, baseball is the soliloquy in Field of Dreams. James Earl Jones' soliloquy about baseball. I think it says everything about this game. And, I know the impact that the game has on people is unbelievable. I mean, when we won our one and only World Series in 2005, you could have gone to any cemetery in the Chicago area the next day, and the graves were decorated with White Sox paraphernalia. And I had people stop me on the street or in stores and thank me. And the following April, one gentleman stopped me in the parking lot and said, "My father died 15 minutes after the last out, and he knew, and he died happy." I mean, that's what this game is all about.
Well, I worked that World Series. I was the crew chief of that World Series. And that was one of my favorite World Series because it was only 4 games.
We made it real short for you. Although one of those games you worked overtime.
We did.
That's a 14-inning game.
Yeah, we were sent to measure your mound that year. They had sent one crew in to measure your mound. They were claiming that the mound was too high because you were having all these starting pitchers go so deep into the game that they thought you were cheating and everything. And so they sent this one crew in there, and your head groundskeeper said, I don't have a level to measure the mound. And so he called the office and said they couldn't measure. They didn't have the equipment. So they called me and sent me in after him. And of course, Roger told me the same thing. He says, I don't have the level. I said, I don't need that. Just go get some string and a tape. And we measured the mound. I was with Brian Gorman. And your general manager was standing at the gate waiting for us to finish measuring the mound. And I'll give you this. It wasn't off an inch anywhere on the mound for that measurement. And you hadn't had to change anything. The only place that it wasn't exactly correct was in the hole where the pitcher's foot lands. It was like a half inch below where it should have been when you grade it. But that happens every time they throw a pitch. So we're getting up to walk off the field, and Brian Gorman whispers in my ear, let's tell him that it's off and we're going to have to dig up the mound. So as we're coming off the field, he says, well, what was it? And I said, we're going to have to dig it up. It's off. And his eyes got big and he started screaming. I said, no, it's all right. Just relax.
I can imagine Roger feeling that way. You remind me of two stories. One is that when the Yankees played here, George was absolutely convinced that the mounds in the Yankee bullpen weren't the right height. So he used to have his guys, measure the mound, the bullpen, just to make sure it was right. And I often thought he probably felt that way because he probably was screwing around with the mounds in Yankee Stadium.
He had to get the idea from somewhere.
But when you talk about Roger Bossard, our groundskeeper, I mean, the field is that's part of his family. He came in to see me one day, and he said to me, how would you feel if a herd of elephants walked on you? And I said, well, I don't think I would like that very much. And he said, well, when you have concerts here, how do you think my grass feels when all those people are looking at it?
Oh, well, how long has he been with you?
Oh God, probably 50 years. His father was the groundskeeper before him.
Wow. Yeah. That's a big story.
Jerry, as we wrap things up, that certainly that 2005 World Series, as Joe mentioned, it was a quick one. Give me a memory about that. And how do you want to be remembered as being one of the longstanding owners in baseball?
Well, I just hope that nobody has to think about remembering me for another few years. I don't really care how I'm remembered, but I guess I'd like to be remembered as somebody who really loved the game and wasn't in it for personal gain at all. Just loved the game, respected the game. That's the way I was taught, growing up in Brooklyn. I forgot, what was your other question?
Your World Series memory.
Oh, my World Series memory is the 14-inning game. Obviously, I remember that last out because there were two great plays made by Juan Uribe for the last two outs. But the 14-inning game just kept going on and on and on. And the top of the 14th inning, the leadoff man got on, and Paul Konerko was the next batter, and he hit into a double play. And I got so upset. I was so upset. I was sitting in a suite, but in Houston, the seats are outside. So I really got ticked off. I got up, I turned around, and I walked into the suite. And as I did, I looked up at the monitor, and I saw a ball going over the fence. I never saw the home run hit that won the game. I'll never forget that.
Well, I can honestly say it's been a privilege to have you on here, and I want to thank you and your entire ball club and for helping me when I set the record in Chicago in May for the most games ever umpired. And your staff was very cordial to everybody that I brought in. We had people come in from all over the country, and I know it was a burden for you, even though you did tell me I had to pay for all the tickets. But and I can't thank you enough for being the custodian of the game that you're talking about. And I can't thank you enough for being on with us, and I can't thank you enough for taking care of our game.
Well, thank you. I mean, it was an honor. Despite the fact that you screwed up those balk calls, it was an honor that I had the game here when you set the record. Everybody was proud that you had asked to do it here in Chicago. We really enjoyed that evening.
Well, Jerry Reinsdorf, we thank you so much for your time. Best of luck to you and your baseball team and your basketball team, and we look forward to seeing you down the road, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, and good health to everybody. Be careful.
Thank you.
My baby took me to the ballpark to see a baseball game. Lord, it had to be at least 99 in the shade. I was stealing a glance at some tight short pants just as I turned my head. My baby grabbed me by the arm and this is what she said. If you cheat on me, you'll be out at home. If I catch you playing the field, you're gonna be long gone. You better play it safe and don't do me wrong. 'Cause if you cheat on me, you'll be out at home.
You've been listening to 5460, the Joe West podcast, here on the Podcast Heat Network. Make sure to subscribe and don't miss an episode each and every Monday. We'll talk to you next week.
She's checking all the signs while I'm enjoying two of the great American pastimes. It's fouling up my nerve watching all these curves, remembering what she said to me. And if I get caught looking, it's gonna be strike three. If you cheat on me, you'll be out at home. If I catch you playing the field, you're gonna be long gone. You better play it safe and don't do me wrong. 'Cause if you cheat on me, well, you'll be out at home. If you cheat on me, you'll be out at home. If I catch you playing the field, you're gonna be long gone. You better play it safe and don't do me wrong. 'Cause if you cheat on me, well, you'll be out at home. If you cheat on me, you'll be out at home.